Welcome to the podcast. Today we have an awesome guest. She runs the Ultra podcast host. She runs Ultra's IG handle, Meghan Gould, the freaking badass Ultra runner. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. That's the first time I've ever been introduced as a badass ultra runner. So,
well, if you run ultras, I mean, it only just comes with the title, right?
Got it. Okay, excellent.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. What's that, Robbie?
I said you run ultras, you're a badass.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Well, if you run, you are, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's true.
So, but if you're an ultra runner, you get a tick on top of that. So, well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. One thing that I'd like to mention is I heard a story from you on Instagram. It was a stories or a reel or something, and you were talking about poop, and I was like, immediately my head went to, we got to have her on the podcast, because if she's willing to talk about poop on Instagram, she's our type of guest.
I mean, it was born out of, so like I'm a coach, have been running ultras for a while, and I predominantly coach women and many women who are new to ultras. And so one of the most common questions is, what happens if you have to go to the bathroom? And so I was getting this question so often, both from like my private clients and just in like DMs on Instagram. I was like, okay, we clearly need to just do a podcast episode about this. And like you and I were talking about this before, it got so much positive feedback. People were messaging me. I got emails about it. And the title of the episode was "What's the Poop Protocol?" And I basically just like told people how to poop in the woods. And it was, just like the simple facts of, it's going to happen at some point. And rather than try to avoid it, like many people do by choosing their routes that, only go through urban areas, like where they know they can go to the bathroom, or they just do loops close to their house or whatever. I just sort of like explained, hey, like this is going to happen. And here's how, like, here's the things that I put in my running pack, and, here's how to find a good spot, So it was a well-received episode.
Well, I feel like I'm going to get backlash if I don't ask, what are the protocols? Maybe give us a 5-minute rundown. You don't have to go into a 45-minute podcast on it, but
I don't know.
It's a great episode. It is a great episode. So if you want the full details, she runs Ultra's podcast. Yeah. Go check it out. The poop protocols. But we'll give you the show notes here.
Basically, I just told people that, it's going to happen. So one of the best things that you can do is just be prepared for it. So I have a little like Ziploc bag in my pack that always just stays with me. And it's got, some folded toilet paper. Sometimes it's got like one or two baby wipes or like wet, the wet wipes that they have. It's got some doggy poop bags in it, and I just try to find a spot that's out of the way, that's, not on someone's private property, because you definitely don't want that happening. But if you're on the trails, in the woods, be as inconspicuous as possible, like find a place to, go off into the woods and dig yourself a little hole, or, pack it out and take it with you. If you're in a park where there is a receptacle, to throw it away, like, just try to be as respectful as possible.
Yeah, I do the same. I carry a Ziploc bag. It's got probably more than a little rolled up toilet paper, but it doesn't weigh that much, so it's okay. I can get away with that. But that's and then lube to reapply afterwards. Because I have a problem called chafing. So
yes, that is a very real problem that many of us face.
Thankfully, there's companies out there that'll take care of us. And so,
yes, that's the gist of it. Like I was, I think more than anything, I was just giving people permission to like say that it's okay that this happens. And there's, sometimes best laid plans, like obviously you want to try to avoid it as much as possible, especially if you're in a place where there are lots of people, but if, it is what it is. Like I don't know what else to say. Like, it's going to happen. So you might as well be prepared. So
don't eat a big breakfast burrito and a pot of coffee before your long run.
Yeah. And that's part of it too. And like, one of the things that I talk to a lot of women about is their nutrition ahead of time. And they're trying to always make some tweaks to it to avoid this, and which I think is smart, right? Like, don't load up on the coffee if you know that that's your nemesis, or don't eat whatever that food is that causes you to have GI distress and then like have to poop. So if you can tailor those things a little bit, that's going to help. But I mean, poop happens. I mean, and it just is what it is.
But I have heard, of people who are newer to trail running that it's not a common thing because, well,
No.
if you're a road runner, you're not going to go into somebody's yard,
Correct.
and then they have accessible bathrooms all over the place. But yeah, if you're a trail runner, you're out in the middle of woods and sometimes really far away from stuff. And so
Yes.
it's a thing, and it's a natural bodily function.
Correct.
Let her go.
You'll be worse off if you don't just go. You know what I mean? It'll get worse. So
it's not going away.
It's not going away. Definitely not.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for the quick show notes. But yeah, if you want to hear the full episode, She Runs Ultras podcast, go check it out. It's a great episode. Well, Meghan, let's back up a little bit. Let's get into your running journey. How did you get into this crazy sport that we do?
Well, I grew up playing team sports as a kid and hated running with a passion. So like I played soccer and softball and I did gymnastics. So any of the running that we were doing was like punishment, aside from running a lot in soccer, just back and forth
Isn't
playing.
that weird that they do that?
Yeah.
I actually, not meaning to cut you off, but I was running with somebody the other day who is a coach. And I think he just coaches like girls softball, but, peewee basically.
Yeah.
And so instead of them messing up and having to run laps or something like that, he's like, they do a half-mile warm-up before the practice or the event. And then if something happens, they do like push-ups or sit-ups or do something like that.
Yeah.
Because he's a runner, he understands and doesn't want people growing up that, attribute running to punishment. And I thought that was very interesting that, that people are starting to make that move. But with him being a runner, it makes more sense. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because I think, if you are of a certain age, then that was par for the course, right? Like if you played a sport and you had to do wind sprints afterwards, or, whatever the torture, whatever the punishment was, and so it wasn't until after I graduated college. So I played softball all 4 years of college as well. And so when I graduated, I was sort of in no man's land. I didn't have a sport. I tried to play club softball, like slow pitch. I'm not sure if you're familiar with slow pitch, but it's a completely different game than fast pitch collegiate softball. And I sucked at it. And so I was like, okay, I think I need to pick up something new. So I just started running a little bit. Did a little bit of working out at the gym. And it wasn't until my younger brother challenged me to run a half marathon that I got at all serious about running it. And it was a road race. So we ran that. I don't know, my memory is horrible to begin with, but it was like in the early 2000s, and he won, but I can run farther than him now, so
joke's on you, brother.
And so that was really when I started enjoying running. And then eventually I was like, okay, well, half marathon wasn't so bad. Like, let's see what this, marathon thing is all about. And of course, it's the same story. It's a very slippery slope. It was all downhill from there because eventually I ran a couple marathons. And throughout this whole thing, I was dealing with a lot of sciatic nerve pain on my right side. And I would be deep into a training run. And at the time I lived in Boston, so I was running sort of all around the city and the parks and whatnot. And I'd be deep into a training run, walking, crying, in so much pain, like considering calling a cab and trucking myself home because I, couldn't do it anymore. And it was after one of my races, I came home and I was getting Runner's World magazine at the time. And there was some sort of article about trail running and ultras. And in it, let me back up. I had so much shame about walking during those training runs and walking during my road races. And then when I read this article, it was like, the heavens opened up, and it was like, it's acceptable to walk. There's lots of snacks. You're on the trails. It's softer surfaces. And I was like, sold. That's what I'm doing next. And so I moved out of Boston and moved to New Hampshire, back to where I grew up, and started running some trails, and ended up eventually running a couple 50Ks and just like sort of fell in love with the sport. That's like the condensed version.
What was your first? First off, I just have to know, what college did you play softball for?
I played for a small Division II college up in Vermont called St. Michael's.
Cool. Never heard of it.
Yeah. It's right next door to UVM, which is a D1 school, which is much bigger, which you probably have heard of, University of Vermont.
Yeah. What was your first 50K?
I did the Pineland Farms 50K in Maine. It no longer is in existence. It's a different, under a different name now, but I did that race. I've done that race a couple times, and ran my first 50 miler there as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to show your age here.
Yeah.
But what years were you starting to get into ultras?
Well, I'm 46. Just we'll get that off of it. I started getting into ultras back in like 2008. I really started running, and I want to say my first ultra was 2016. So like I'd been like casually running, and I spent a number of years like running marathons and hating it.
Yeah.
And then eventually like I took some breaks in between there because it was just really so painful for my body. Like I was just not doing well.
Isn't that weird? Like I hated my first marathon too. Like I enjoyed the experience, but like I was like, this is not enjoyable. And people don't understand that. It's like I didn't like it, so I didn't. I mean, I did another marathon last year, so 6 years after my first marathon, but it was a trail marathon, so it was different. But I'm signed up for my second road marathon this year. But it was like, I know, who am I? But yeah, it's like I didn't enjoy it either. That's odd. I've never heard of anyone else who. I've heard of people who like enjoy it and then move into the ultra world and then go back and forth. But yeah, I wasn't a fan. Also,
I think I'd be hard pressed to go back to the roads.
Did your
It did. Actually, that's so funny. Yes. So a client gave this to me.
There you go.
So a client gave me this, and I just realized that. I was like, wait a second. This was not intentional at all, but like, this is my new favorite water bottle. I have a Stanley and I have this water bottle. And so one lives upstairs and one lives downstairs, so that
That's
like,
funny.
if I forget one, I have water whenever I need it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So that was sort of the start for me. And throughout that time, I was trying to like figure out this whole sciatic nerve thing. And eventually I did get it sorted out. So I've been pain-free for, probably going on like almost 10 years now, which has been amazing because that was putting a real crimp in my training. And it was like, running on the trails was obviously better because softer surfaces, but a lot more up and down, a lot of elevation change and stuff like that. So that was taking a toll on it too. So it wasn't until I really like figured out the right mix of walking and running and strength training and mobility stuff that like sort of clinched the deal for me. And I haven't had an issue with it since. So
awesome.
Yeah.
What has your favorite ultra been? I'm just saying, Robbie, I'm
Well-
hitting with the hard questions here.
Yeah, I know.
That's Robbie's job.
I feel like it's interesting. I'm sort of torn between my very first one because it was sort of like, it was, it's sort of like you have this epiphany. You're like, oh, like I can do these really amazing, like hard and challenging things, and it was sort of like that. I don't know. It was just like really eye-opening for me because, I had a lot of like negative self-talk and just like was really hard on myself throughout life. And I really was not a good loser in the sense that like, you know, in team sports and stuff like that, like if we lost, like it was always like my fault. And, you know, I just had a hard time letting go of that stuff. And so running just in general for me was really good because it taught me that like there's nobody to blame but yourself, but also you can take full responsibility and full charge of your training so that like you don't have to be mad at yourself at the end. You know what I mean? Like I bear full responsibility for it. So it was cool to me to finish that first one and be like, okay, I did that, you know, like, because I didn't have a coach. My very first one, like I stumbled, I joke about it on my podcast. Like I Googled my way through my first 50K because I had no clue what I was doing. I was wearing the wrong shoes. I was not eating. I did everything wrong. And so that's why like I started my podcast because I was like, well, if, you know, I don't want anyone else to suffer the way that I did. So if I can shortcut something for you in a positive way, you know, like here you go, I'll tell you everything I did wrong. And then you can choose whether you want to test it out for yourself and see if it's wrong or whether you want to take my word for it. You know what I mean? So, it's a toss up. It's either my first race and also the last race that I did, which was the Tahoe 200. So it's sort of like a yin and a yang, like the first and the last and the longest. So
yeah, I was just about to ask what's the biggest distance that you've done. So
yeah, that one,
cool.
The Tahoe 200. Yeah.
What drove you to want to do a 200 other than just like natural progression or just
insanity? I literally, here's the funny story. It was the night before my third 100. And I was in my rooftop tent, like, you know, just laying there, getting ready for the race, you know, like, okay. And I put my name into the lottery for the Tahoe 200. And it was sort of like putting your name. So I've done the Barkley Fall Classic twice as well, which is like you put your name in the lottery. I never thought I would get picked for my first one, let alone for my second Barkley Fall Classic. So wow. I was like, this is sort of like a double-edged sword because I'm like 2 for 2 in lotteries. So I could get lucky and maybe get into the Tahoe 200, or this will be like the time that I strike out and I won't get in. Well, so you put your name in, but then you don't hear for another like 6 weeks or something like that. And so it was the night before my 100-miler, I put my name in the lottery, and then I was like texting some friends. I was like, okay, so yeah, I just like put my name in a 200-mile lottery, and they were like, okay, great. So it was a little bit of insanity.
That's awesome. I've heard that. Reversed. Yeah.
You didn't wait till after your race.
Yeah.
The night before.
Yeah. Well, I figured like I was feeling really good about that 100-miler because I had done it, you know, before. And so I was like, just sort of coming back. I was trying to do it in under 24 hours. I did not make that goal, but I was feeling really good. And I was like, you know, what are the chances? Like, I'm never going to get into this thing. Lo and behold, I did.
Have you put in for the Western States lottery yet? Or
you know, it's super funny because I've actually coached I have a client, shout out to Ben, who has pulled a ticket for Western States so many times. He is the luckiest man ever, and he's completed it a couple times. He has not finished it yet. I say yet because he will never give up on this dream. But I have zero interest. In Western States, and I don't know why it is. It's probably, I don't know. I really don't know why. I haven't sat down to think about it, but it's just one of those things that doesn't really, some people have races that are like, they are very gung-ho for, and some people could take or leave it. And for some reason I know I'm offending so many people right now. They're listening to this and they're going, this chick doesn't want to do Western States.
No, I get it. And maybe it's wrapped around something, how it's so big, and it's like it's a spotlight on everybody. I totally understand that. Yeah. And then the chance of getting in is very slim unless you put years and years of effort, like I have. But yeah, so no, I totally get it. I do. Yeah. That's all
I'm
I
right
can
there
say,
with you.
He is, but
me.
he's his ass will be there when I get in. So
yeah, I would be more than happy to like crew for someone, to pace someone. It just is not, it
I
just
wonder if you
doesn't
saw
interest
the
me.
atmosphere, like if you were there and you saw the atmosphere, if that would change your mind.
I mean, I've been to quite a few races, and I will agree with you that I have been sucked in, when you
Yeah.
get there and you see it. But I agree. I also think it's just too big of a spectacle. And that's no disrespect to the race and the organizers and the people that want to do it. Just for me, it just feels too much. I'm definitely more of a fan of like the smaller type, like grassroots, and I totally get that Tahoe 200 is not that. But, for the most part, the races that I've done, I'm more drawn to sort of like the middle of nowhere. Not very many people show up to them, more grassroots type of a feel.
I feel the same way about Leadville. I
Mm.
went to Leadville for I don't know how many years, at least 6 or 7 years in a row, and I would crew or pace or whatever. And when I was living in Colorado, I pretty much ran the whole trail. And I'm like, this is something I understand why it draws the attention, but for me, it's just not something I want to do.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Leadville as well, because people have asked me about those two races in particular. I think a lot of the reason for that is because they are very well known, right? They're high profile, highly attended races. They have lure around them. You have to, enter the lottery. So it's not just like any Joe Schmo can get in type of a thing. It's, you've got to like you said, put your time and effort and dedication in over the course of years in order to get into some of those races. And that is appealing on some level, but unappealing to me on some other level. So I don't know. Maybe someday I'll change my mind, but for now, that's my answer and I'm sticking to it.
I look at cutoffs. That's what gets me.
Yes, me too.
They are tight cutoffs for tough races.
Yeah.
And especially Western 18,000 foot of climb with, I get it has 20,000 foot of down, but you still have to climb 18,000 foot. And it's like, and a 30-hour cutoff. Like, that's tough.
Yeah, tough but not impossible. And I also choose races based on cutoffs too, because, I'm not fast. I can go for very long periods of time and I can, go halfway decently fast, but that's not my shtick. I would much prefer to cruise and enjoy myself and, definitely have, there's hard times that come along in the enjoyment, but like, I'm not a fan of soul crushing types of efforts, so
Soul crushing.
What hundreds have you done?
I've done the same race 3 times. I've done the Ghost Train 100 here in New Hampshire. The first year I actually DNF'd it at 75 miles, which they don't technically classify as a DNF, but I classify it as a DNF because I was going for 100. But then I finished it 2 more times. So awesome. I've done it twice. Yeah.
Cool. Any desire to do any other 100 around the U.S.?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple interesting races like out west that I was thinking about doing, but unfortunately this year I ended up, I had all these amazing races that I had planned out, including I had put my name into the lottery for Moab 240 this year. And I was 20th on the wait list, which is not that far down the wait list. No. And I very nearly broke my foot on the 22nd of February and have been sidelined for, I was out for probably like 2 solid months and just recently have been able to start actual like purposeful running without my foot just aching for like 2 weeks straight after any sort of running. So I took myself out of all of my races for this year, which is kind of a bummer, but I really want to do Moab next year. So I'm just converting this year into sort of like rebuild my foot and rebuild my cardio. And then I'm going to roll that over into some fun stuff for next year. So
nice. Cool.
Yeah.
I've signed up for a couple races and every single one of them I've had to withdraw from because of work. So, dang it. Need to figure something out.
Yeah, that whole work thing, it definitely gets in the way of running ultras.
I know it does. Can we just not work? Like, that seems pretty good, right?
Well, I mean, I guess if you're like, you could make a living being a running influencer.
I mean, you could if, yeah, I can't, but maybe. Well, speaking of doing jobs, how did your running journey turn into wanting to help others and into your coaching journey?
It was a pretty natural progression. So back when I was living in Boston and running and doing, the road races, I I had a corporate job where I worked in event planning and marketing for a couple big beverage companies, and I could see the writing on the wall that I was going to be laid off because when they do like some reorganization, the event people are always the first to be let go. And so at the time, I was like, I need to get a different job. Like this is because the backstory to that is I had been laid off from the same job and the same parent company about a year earlier, and was like able to find another job on another brand under the same umbrella in the doing the same thing, and then I got laid off twice basically from the same company within a 2-year span, which is like my other claim to fame.
Oh, no.
So I could see the writing on the wall, and I was just like, okay, I need to do something else. And so I had mentioned I was going to the gym, and it was like this tiny little, Boston gym around the corner from my apartment. And I was seeing some of the trainers like work with the clients that they had. And I was like, you know what? That sort of looks like fun. Completely different. I had gotten interested in strength training. And so I was studying to take my personal training certificate exam while I was still working. And so when I got laid off, finally, I moved back here to New Hampshire and just started working at a local gym. And so I did that for a few years, worked at the gym, did the front desk thing, was training a bunch of clients, and then ended up opening up my own sort of like smaller boot camp space separate from that gym, and was training clients and doing all that stuff. So that was probably like 5 or 6 years worth of work that I had done. I ended up going back to marketing, beverage marketing for another friend, but like it's pretty funny actually. It's a good story. Ended up moving to Arizona to do this and work for a friend. And the short version of the story is that the company basically folded. I quit before shit really hit the fan. And the last I heard, they were being investigated by the FBI for fraud and embezzlement. No. So I got out of there in plenty of time. So when I came back here, I went back to doing some more training stuff. So I've always just like, I played 3 sports in high school. I played all through college. Like I've always been interested in sports and like coaching and personal training and helping. And so it just was like a sort of a natural progression. So I went from personal training, actually coached triathlon for a while because I was into triathlons. And then it just sort of morphed into run training. And so that just became, the thing that I really wanted to focus on. And then it became, I only want to work with women. And then it was like, okay, I really just want to work with women who want to run ultras. And then it was, okay, I really just want to help women bridge the gap between road, either half or full marathon, and that first 50K. Cause that was such a huge learning gap for me that I was like, okay, we need to like smooth out this transition because it was like a big speed bump. Like I had a really hard time with it. So
do you just work with women or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So pretty much for a while when I first started, I was definitely still coaching guys and girls. And then when I really dug into like, okay, who do I enjoy helping? Who am I having the most fun coaching? What's the specific like aspect of running? Like, is it all running or is it ultras? It just netted out to be first 50K people. And I do still coach women who are doing 50 milers, 100 milers, 200 milers in the container of this membership that I have. But the way that people generally come in is because they're training for their first 50K and they want some help and some assistance.
That's really cool. That's really, yeah, you kind of found that niche, and a lot of people are jumping into the trail world. I mean, you can look at the numbers of growth that we've had over.
Yeah.
I think I did a video and it showed like so many people had run last year, and it was like, you know, it's still like 0.02 of the population of North America had run an ultra last year. But I mean, the amount of people, it was huge from compared to 2022. And so, you know.
Yeah, I think I messaged you after that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I was like, where'd you find that stat?
You know, you started running ultras in 2015. Robbie started in, you know, I think 2011. I've asked him this question 1,000 times. Ooh, I got it right.
You got it right.
Yeah. I didn't run my first one until 2020. So I'm behind the curve compared to you guys, but I'm trying to catch up.
I think you're on par. It sounds to me from what I have seen and listened to that you're right on par. So
I do my best.
Well, that's the other thing too, is like people, you know, I think like sometimes ultra running is a little bit of confusing for people, because while there is a progression, 50K, 50 miles, 100K, so on and so forth, right? People can kind of get confused about like where to go and what to do, because they might really just like the 50K distance, but they might see people doing all these other races and they're like, do I have to? Because that's one of the questions I get a lot too, is like, it's almost like a qualifier. If I run this 50K, do I also then have to do a 50 miler and so on? And I'm always telling people like, no, you can do one and be done and still call yourself an ultra runner too. Like you don't have to like, you know, drink the Kool-Aid and do all the races. If you don't want to, you can just do the one and, you know, and have that be it.
But they serve the Kool-Aid at all the aid stations.
This is true. This is true.
And so, yeah, good luck only doing one.
Yeah, for sure.
I've never officially I've never towed the line of a 50K. Ooh. I've run the distance a bunch of times, like, you know, doing fat asses, or I did a virtual one during COVID, but I've never officially ran a 50K. And I just realized that as we were talking about running 50Ks.
That's funny.
So that is funny.
I've never officially run a 100K.
Oh, I didn't until last year. I ran my first one last year.
Nice.
And I actually think it's my favorite distance now.
Really?
You get to sleep in your own bed at night.
Yeah. And so, I saw your post about that. Your post the other day where it like ran through all the distances. P.S. You were missing the 200 mile.
Okay, so here I'm going to confess a little bit. That was a reshare because I've already done it. And it was successful. So, you know, all the big platform people tell you to reshare stuff that's successful. So, I got tons of messages last time, and I got tons of messages this time. Like, where's the 200? Yeah. And I'm like, I've never run a 200. I don't know how to speak to it. So,
I know. Well, it's like 100 only worse.
Yeah, those are the races that I've run, and so I can speak to them. So
yeah, no, I'm just giving you shit. Your description for all of them was really accurate. So I was really hoping that when I got to the end that there would be a 200. But I agree with you because 50 and 100K, you can typically 50 miles and 100K, you can typically sleep in your own bed. When you get to the 100 miler, when you get to 200 miles, you're not sleeping in your own bed for sure.
And let me caveat to saying that 100K can sleep in our bed. It was like 2:00 in the morning, the next day. And so, but I still got to go home and go to bed. So, it's not like, it's not like 7 or 8 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm done. No, I'm not that person.
Yeah. No, me neither.
16, 17 hours is still a long time. So
yeah. I mean, I DNF'd the 100K that I ran for a couple reasons. One, the heat was epic and I don't do well in the heat. And the second one was because I got lost it's funny because it's literally like 10 miles this way away from my house, but the main race was bike centered. So it was predominantly a cross-country mountain bike race, and they got the bright idea to tack on a 100K running event to it. And I was like, oh, this will be great because it's right down the street. Like, I don't run on those trails because most of them are on private land. So, but like, whatever, it'll be great. Like, what could go wrong? And I got my first lap under my belt, and I was like, oh, this is not good. And I was about to like duck into the woods again. And my husband met me on the side of the road. It was just this random dirt road, and the trail, just ducked right in. And I was like, I don't think this is going to be a smart idea, because this is the place that I got lost last time. I actually found this French Canadian guy wandering around in the woods. He had no water. He was so dehydrated. His English, not so great. My French, like only from high school. So like we were able to converse a little bit, and I was able to we were able to get out of the woods. But eventually I just looked at my husband and I was like, I think this is like not a good idea. So I pulled the plug, and I went back to the race director, and I was like, just a like little side note, the next time you mark this course, can you mark it for runners and because all they did was use yellow and like fluorescent yellow and fluorescent green survey tape, and they put it like up in the trees.
Oh no.
So
you can't
like
see it. Yeah.
You can't see it. And like in the sun, and in the like, why not use pink or orange or like something bright? And you know what I mean? I got so horribly lost, because they'd also, the maps that they gave out. So this is like if you ever want to make a really good race, make the course readable, give people actual maps, and like put the markers where people can see them. So yeah. I wasn't the only one to get lost. There were lots of people that DNF'd, lots of runners that DNF'd, because they got so turned around in the woods and couldn't figure out how to get themselves out. They had to rescue a couple people.
Oh my gosh. That, and like I like grassroots races, and I've run a couple grassroots races, and some of them have been great, but my bad experiences have been with grassroots races. And so it's not saying that I'm not going to support those races, but like, no. You're going to get, I understand they're going to be cheaper races, and you're going to get, but you're going to get more bang for your buck out of the bigger ones, because you're going to get that level of support. The trails are going to be marked.
Yeah.
The ones that are selling out, like I'm assuming Tahoe 200, like you probably knew exactly where you were going. Like,
yep,
you had no question. The aid stations were phenomenal. And, it's just like, you're going to spend more, and they're not grassroots, but you know what you're getting out of them.
Yeah.
And the grassroots ones, like, you spend $100, you run 100K, but you may have some water at an aid station, and it's like,
that was the other thing.
That. And so
that was the other thing too, because it was a mixed race, mountain bikers and runners, I got to an unmanned water station, no water. And that was the start of my dehydration issue, and definitely other runners as well. And this was in the, like, when I say I knew where I was, I'm not kidding. It's like literally 10 miles down the street this way. And like, I know where I was, but in the woods, I would not have been able to like call my husband and say like, come and get me. Like there was no cell service there either. So I had to get myself out of where I was in order to get help. So I didn't really have a choice to like sit there, because I had no cell service. But like, that's the thing too. It's like, and this isn't to, knock on any first time race directors or grassroots races that aren't like big, but there are little things that you can do. And typically like the first year is always your lesson learning year. 'Cause I've put races on. And so I'm like, I have gotten my fair share of negative comments and feedback. Yeah. Yeah.
I will never run another race.
To be fair, I've done mostly shorter distance races, but still hosted them, put them on. But I mean, like I think if you have run a bunch of races, you can put your runner hat on, so to speak, and come at it from that perspective and say, hey, what terrible experiences did I have? How do we not repeat those? And here are like the little things, just making sure that the course is marked, that if it's possible to give them the course ahead of time, if it's on private land and private landowners, which is like a thing around here, private landowners don't want you there until race day. Fine. But, like doing everything you can to ensure people have a good time, they have what they need, they're feeling safe and taken care of, like they're not going to be lost in the woods, like linking arms with some dude they have no idea who he is, and just like marching him out of the woods. I mean, it was obviously a memorable experience, because I'm telling the story now and we both live to tell the tale, but
it's too funny.
Yeah.
So where did the podcast come into things? Was that before coaching, after coaching? Just you kind of saw that?
Somewhere in the middle. Like I was a friend of mine who does business coaching. She was helping me with some email stuff, and she was like, "I really think you should start a podcast." And I immediately shot her down. I was like, absolutely not. I hate the sound of my own voice. No one's going to listen to it. The podcast market is so saturated. Who no one knows who I am. Like I had all the excuses. And so I went into it with the idea that I would do like a couple episodes just to appease her and like tell her that I had put out the podcast. And then it was fun. And I knew in the beginning no one was going to listen to it. And so, so that's how I ended up with some of the like questionable podcasts, questionable episodes at the beginning. I think like just for the record, every podcaster cringes at their first like I don't know, 25 or 50 episodes. Like I think about some of the stuff I did in those first episodes and I'm like,
Me
oh,
and
can we
Robbie are
just take those
shaking our
down?
head. We know. I don't think we've had some bad ones in my opinion. Like the guests have been great. Don't get me wrong there, but like some that I could be like, that one probably shouldn't have asked that question, or like we've gone into a podcast where it's like this is going to be sketch, or and so our very first one we recorded it and then I hit delete or something. I don't know. We lost it, and so we luckily it was a friend of ours, so we went back and re-recorded it, but like it wasn't natural the second time.
Yeah.
And we put it out, but
you
know what I mean?
Yeah, you just got to. And like, so I did quite a few episodes and then eventually I got notes from people and they were like, I'm listening to your podcast. It's so amazing. Like you've taught me so much. Thank you. And I was like, oh shit, now I know people are listening. Like now, now the heat is on, but it is fun. And again, it's part of my whole my goal of just trying to help shortcut the process. I only share things that I've personally done myself. I'm not talking about stuff that I have no knowledge of. I'm just trying to give people. I think to back up, I was listening to some running podcasts when I first started, and I was comparing like my work to say like Rich Roll is somebody that I used to listen to a lot, like when podcasts first came out, and I was like, I'm not Rich Roll. Like nobody is going to want to listen to this. And so, but what I was noticing was on a lot of these other podcasts, it was super famous, top performing, named athletes that are amazing. Don't get me wrong. But I was having a really hard time relating to them. There'd be nuggets, like little pearls of wisdom that they would drop that I would think, oh, definitely got to write that down. Definitely going to try that. But it was just very much like, I can't relate to you. And so I did some searching and I was trying to find other podcasts, specifically female podcasts, like podcasts for women about running and trails. And I was like, okay, there's not a ton out here. So I was just like, I think I'm just gonna, take Cass's advice, my friend's advice, and I'm just gonna share all of my stuff, and if it helps someone, then that's great. And if not, it's fine. I'm just screaming into the void and nobody can hear me. It's all good. But we're 222 episodes down, so I think I'm safely beyond newbie stage, and we're we're going full steam ahead.
Isn't getting the notes from people, the DMs, the messages, the coolest thing?
Yeah.
We've linked people together that have helped each other out. Like, hey, you know anybody running this race? Like, oh, I know somebody who lives in the area. Let me hook you up. And then people messaging us like, we enjoyed the podcast. Like, thanks for sharing your, whatever insight on this. And it's like, to me, that's why me and Robbie do it,
Yeah. Yeah. I think like it's super helpful to be able to see and hear and learn from other people's experiences. And it's always, like I said before, when you do this type of thing, podcasting, it does really feel a lot of times like you're screaming into the void. Like, you can look at your download numbers and you can see, oh, so many people listen to that episode or you actually don't even, I haven't done my research yet because I know they recently changed the metrics for what qualifies as a download now. But you can see these numbers, but it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, like, 760 people listened to this one episode. Like, okay, what did they do with it? You know what I mean? So like you said, when you get notes from people, it's really validating, but also it like just really helps me to know that, okay, I'm not screaming into the void, and B, I am really helping people with something specific, and they're going to be able to use that, even if it just sort of, like I said, we'll circle back to the like poop protocol, like even if it just gives them permission to be like, okay, this is part of what the deal of ultra running is, like gives them permission to stop stressing about something, then I'm all for that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What have you learned about yourself since starting the podcast?
Oh man. So many things. Where to start? Oh my God. I feel like having a podcast and training for an ultra, I feel like are very similar in the sense that like you must show up and do the work if you want the result. Obviously, early on, I committed to one episode a week, and some months that's super easy, and some months that's very hard. There was a period where I was doing 2 a week, and one was like a longer, and then one was just like almost like just like a voice memo, like, hey, I'm thinking about this, like 10 minutes and under. That became unsustainable for me. So I went back to just one episode a week. But the two are very linked in the sense that, you have to have a plan, you have to do the work, you have to do it whether you want to or not. You're not going to get the end result, which is to like grow your podcast and help more people and reach more people, if you only show up once a month and you do, the bare minimum. I have learned that I do better if I can have a plan and like write things down ahead of time. There are times when I just have an idea and I'm going to sit down in front. I don't do well if I'm just going to sit down in front of the mic and like ramble. I don't do well with that. So having a plan is super helpful. It's definitely forced me to get over a lot of insecurities about like my voice. Like I don't particularly care for the sound of my voice, but honestly, I've gotten quite a few notes from people who are like, your voice is so calming and soothing. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm hearing fingernails on a chalkboard. So it's like, it's nice to hear. But it's definitely one of those pursuits like ultra running where, you have to show up, you got to do the work. And it's gonna be a long time before you see the results, because I don't know about you guys, but like I didn't really start getting any traction or getting feedback from anybody other than like friends and family that like knew that I was doing this for at least probably a year, like 8 months, 9 months. Like you really have to you got to be invested in it. So
yeah, we started what did we start? September of 22, I think is what it was. Yeah, we do an episode a week since September 22. I don't know how many podcasts it's been. We've thrown a couple in there like on a Thursday randomly. Like we do a thing called Tales from the Trails where we'll just go over a topic like, are you running with poles? Or, what kind of headlamps are you using? That type of stuff, and talk about gear and stuff like that. Kind of like your poop protocol, just your random one-off.
Yep.
But we haven't done one of those in a while. We need to get back onto it. But yeah, and I was at a race last year. I was at Bighorn 100 last year, helping a friend get their first buckle. And, I had a couple people come up to me like, and Robbie was there as well. We had people come up to us and be like, hey, listen to the podcast, blah, blah, blah. And we had some stickers on us. So we were like, if you see us at Bighorn 100, come up and we'll give you some stickers for the podcast. And like, I probably gave out like 20 or 30 stickers. And so it was kind of cool that
that's awesome.
I gave some out just to give some out. But yeah, there was a couple that I gave out from people that recognized us, or somebody would message us and be like, hey, I'm going to be at Bighorn too. Like, I'll be running or whatever. And so it was kind of a neat experience to like know that there's actual ultra runners out there that are listening to this podcast. So
I have a funny story for you guys. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're not just screaming into the void. There are actual people on the other end of this thing.
And they're probably like, hey, I'll listen. No.
What's up? So I had this funny experience a couple years ago. I was maybe like a year into the podcast, and I was running a 50K, not too far from here, probably like an hour and a half north. And I was running along and I was talking to a friend of mine, and this woman came up from behind me, and she goes, "She runs ultras, right?" And I was like, and I didn't have anything on me that said nothing. I literally don't. I have one t-shirt that has my logo on it, and I don't wear it outside because I don't like, it's like a test run. So I don't wear it out. I had nothing on me. And she's like, "She runs ultras, right?" And she pointed at me, and I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She goes, "I recognize your voice."
I had a similar experience last year at Black Hills 100. I was just out on the course and getting some video, and I was saying good job to people as they go by, and I said good job to this guy, and he's like, "Hey, Gould Adventures?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I listened to your guys' podcast." He's like, I recognize the voice. I was like, "Whoa, that was kind of weird."
Yeah, it's definitely a trippy experience to get recognized just for your voice. So
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. She was super sweet about it. She's like, "Oh my God, I can't remember what episode she said she was up to, but she was like, "Oh my God, I'm up to episode 74, whatever she said." And she's like, "I loved that one with the," and I was like, "All right." She was able to actually quote episodes and actual material. And I was like, yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Meghan, tell us a little bit about what kind of gear you're using.
Gosh, I have so many favorite things. We've been on this discussion inside my group talking about poles. So I have to give a big shout out to my favorite poles, and I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not sponsored by any of these guys. But I just happen to really love my Black Diamond Distance Carbon Zs. They are collapsible. They're super lightweight. I love, love, love them. They have been through a couple 100-milers. They've been all the way through Tahoe with me on a lot of my training runs. I have not managed to break them yet. I am not gentle with them at all. So they are well worth the money. I think if you're in the market for some poles, you should definitely check them out because, like I said, they're super comfortable. They're super lightweight. And I can't break them. I can't seem to break them.
They do not like winter, though. I will tell you that.
Oh, interesting.
I used them for the White Mountain 100, and they were like leaking fluid out of them, and yeah. I fixed them, but they weren't a fan, and they squeaked a lot. So it was kind of, it was annoying. The guy I was running with was like, "What is going on?" So.
Don't mind me. It's just my pole. It's just my poles. Yeah. That's good to know because I've used them in cold weather, but I have not used them, well, obviously like in an Alaskan winter. But yeah, that's good to know. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing I'm a big fan of is my Salomon pack. I love it. It's like my second skin, but at this point, so much so that I thought I heard a rumor that Salomon was getting rid of the women's specific 12-liter version, that I bought another one. I don't need a new one, but I bought another one because I didn't want to. I told the story on the podcast about going through the process of trying to figure out what pack I was going to wear for Tahoe, because you have so much, like you for the White Mountain 100, like you have so much mandatory gear that you have to carry, and you're going to be in between aid stations for so long, like you need some stuff. So I ordered so many packs, like thousands of dollars worth of packs that I ordered and then sent back, right? Yeah. Trying to find the right one. And I settled on this one because it's super comfortable. I don't get any chafing with it. I like all of the pockets, the capacity to put 2 flasks up front. And then I actually it's not meant for a 2-liter bladder, but I ran a 2-liter bladder in the back of mine so that I would have ample fluid. So I'm like just a huge fan of that pack. So again, not sponsored by them at all. I just love that stuff. So Those are
Awesome.
probably the two things I could not live. If you had to ask me two things I can't live without, those would be the two. I mean, aside from my shoes, but like those two things. Yeah.
Well, what shoes are you wearing?
I'm a huge fan of ultras.
Okay.
So I've been running in ultras for years. So I normally run the Olympus just because I like the cushioning, but I've been through the Lone Peak. I've been through the Timps. I've been through a couple road versions, just, to have road shoes kicking around. Um, I wish they would stop messing with the last. I wish they would just go back to the Olympus 4, which would be great, but I'm okay with the 5.
Yeah. So you've gone through their whole transition of like selling the company and getting,
Yeah.
I noticed I used to wear ultras too. I make fun of people who wear ultras now because your calves, Achilles, it's a big thing or whatever.
But I have zero issues. Those memes get me so much because like I get why people have issues with them, but I don't have a single issue with them. The toe box is the thing that I need the most. Like used to love Hoka's until Hoka, everybody like it's like everybody jumps ships. All the designers, they just jump from one to the next, and you can like see which designers are going where because like the next year the shoe looks like the previous brand that they used to work for. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
totally
it's like
does. They snipe them. They go out and grab the other. Yeah. But I love my favorite shoe of all time is the Temp 1.5s.
Yes.
I absolutely love those shoes. But then they started coming out with that other crap, and then I went away from them. But that was a phenomenal shoe.
I loved the Temps because they had like just enough cushion. They weren't as big as the Olympus, but they weren't as thin as the Lone Peak. The toe box was wide enough. I wish they would go back to that one.
Yeah. The memes are funny about them though.
They are. I'm not going to lie. They're funny. They're funny.
Any particular clothing brand or just kind of like what fits, what works type thing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm down for whatever. I do like a mix of things. So, I mean, I tend to spend my money on the pack, the shoes, the poles. When it comes to clothing, like I oftentimes run in Old Navy leggings, right? Like capris or even the bike, what they call like bike shorts. I just love those.
I think you're the second person we've had that said that they run in Old Navy leggings.
Yeah, they're really good. I'm not gonna lie. Like, some of the other higher end brands, I don't feel like they're worth the money. I hate to say it, but like, if they're just going to get trashed, like a lot of, like if you're running and you trip and you fall, look, I don't typically, I have bought Lululemon and all sorts of other expensive Athleta, all sorts of other expensive brands and been like, they're okay, but these seem to work pretty well for me. Smartwool or Darn Tough socks. We were talking before about like sports bras and tops and stuff like that. Again, like I actually love, there's a brand that's at Target called All in Motion just for like shirts that are really great. They're not super expensive, but I mean, you can also get stuff at Old Navy. I do have a couple Patagonia shirts that I really like. So every once in a while I'll splurge and buy one of those. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, we were talking about sports bras. Truthfully, I think there are a ton of great sports bra brands. One that I've had really good luck with, again, is that Target brand, All in Motion. If you are someone who needs more support, that's probably not going to be your brand. I don't have experience with this next one, but I have a bunch of clients who we actually had this topic come up in one of our coaching calls the other week, and they were loving a brand, which is very funny, called Handful. Yeah, no joke. But they love it. They said that it was really good. And I'm not remembering which bra, which model specifically. But you're starting to see like a lot more women come into the clothing space and like, be athletes and like make products for athletes that don't chafe, that don't have too many buckles or too much decorative stuff. Like, function over fashion type of things. So
Yeah.
again, that's not a brand that my husband actually, we were going into Eastern Mountain Sports, which is kind of like an REI over here. And there was like a whole rack of sports bras. He's like, don't you need a new one? I was like, no, because I wanted to order one from Handful and try it out because all the ladies in my group were raving about it. So I was like, well, clearly I need to try this out. So
yeah, I think that it's funny that you mentioned that with the not the sports bras, but the the clothing companies are starting to get actual athletes. One thing that I've noticed is they're getting athletes that are not your quote unquote the marathon runner that
yes,
weighs 110 pounds, and it's like, yeah, you got people out there that live in those bodies, but you have tons of people that are just all sorts of sizes, like make sizes for everyone.
yes,
And so
yeah,
I see that there's a big swing in since I became into the running world in 2016, 17, I've noticed that, it was that type of stuff. And it's like, you have to wear these clothes and this is all that fits. And then,
yeah.
we've even gone to stores and it's like, well, they don't have my size in anything here. So yeah, I've noticed a big trend where they're starting to sell clothes that are sizable for everyone because, there's runners of all sizes out there. Like,
Yeah. Which is which is great because like, even if you have what people would outwardly say is like a thin frame or like, you're not overweight, that doesn't necessarily even mean that you have an easy time finding clothes. Like I hate looking for pants or jeans because I have a relatively small waist, but I have athletic legs. Like I have thighs and it's hard sometimes to find those things. And so it's nice now that more brands are adding some more stretch to things and like brands are coming out that are like specifically, I can't think of the one off the top of my head. Instagram has my number. Like they are hammering me hard with this one brand. So you would think you would think I'd remember it, but clearly I haven't seen it enough times. But it's like meant for almost like women who are like CrossFit / power lifters, like women who have, muscular thighs, but tiny waists. I was like, oh, okay, I'm happy to be like included in that group. But it's like clothing brands that are specifically meant for that body type again, but also, the wider, broader spectrum of body types too. People who don't look a specific way that, are rounder or taller or wider or whatever, like it's so good to start to just see that we've got options and we don't have to like pour ourselves into these tiny little garments anymore that, because you need stuff that moves and flexes with you. You can't be like stuffed into everything.
One thing that kind of aggravates me is for guys is I tear all of my liners out because
Interesting.
I've been a squatter all my life, and so I have squat thighs, and the thunderstorms roll in when I'm running around in liners, so I tear all my liners out and wear just typical boxer shorts or whatever. But no company, I mean, there's a few companies sell, like they also have this, but like I want a particular short and they don't sell it in linerness. They have to sell liners. And so that's one thing that's aggravating for me. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that that tear their liners out just because they have thunder thighs like I do. And so.
I'm with you. I feel the same way about there's like women's running shorts that are like that too, that have liners in them. And I typically won't wear those because they don't sit well. And that's like the only way that I can describe it. They're either too light or too loose or they're too tight. And it's like uncomfortable, like, you know what I mean? So it's unfortunate, but that's why I typically tend to go with like the leggings or the compression shorts, because then, you get to just like set it and forget it. It's like everything is just in its place,
Ooh, Robbie, I got to ask her the question. Let me ask you the question. Okay, so I recently started not caring what other people think. Well, This happened a long time ago, but now, it was a long time ago that I stopped caring about what people think. But I recently started wearing leggings in the wintertime without shorts over them because I don't care what you
Yeah.
think. You don't have to be there if you don't want to see that whatever I have. So, but this is okay for me to wear leggings, right? I also have some 9-inch tights that are the shorts.
Yep.
My wife says that they're different. She said she's not telling me that I can't wear them. She just said that there is a difference in the tights versus the shorts. Your thoughts?
I think, but 9 inches, that's pretty long. We're not talking like 4 or 5 or even 6 inches, right? Like, so they're almost like bike shorts, right?
Yeah, I would say they're about the same length as bike shorts. They're 9
See,
inches. They're
probably
above my
asking,
knee, but
yeah.
they're not.
Yeah, you're probably asking the right person for you, but the wrong person for your wife, because my husband races bikes. And so, like, like guys in tight shorts, like that makes sense to me,
See,
from a cycling context.
And we ride bikes too. And I wear the biking shorts, and they're about the same length as biking shorts, but you're running in them. So
no, I think it's totally fine.
I was saying the same thing. I'm like, what is the difference? She's like, there's a difference. And I'm like, what is it?
As long as they're not like triathlon suits and they're white, like as long as they are dark colors, you're
they're
good.
black. They're black.
Good. You're fine. You're in the clear.
Now I'm wondering about the white ones. I got to go get some white ones.
No, immediately no. All you have to do to talk yourself out of that is look for like a pro triathlete, kit, and watch Ironman or watch like some sort of high level triathlon, and you'll see there are some really bad kit choices. Like some of the designers, like they need to really think about where they're putting the colors before they make the suit. Yeah.
Kind of like the Nike running Olympic.
Oh yeah. Jeez.
Exactly. That's a great example.
They did not think of that one when they put that one out.
Nope.
So it's funny. Does your husband race professionally or?
No, he grew up riding bikes of all kinds, dirt, like road, gravel, mountain bike. And so, but he's been riding, forever. So yeah, he's always out on his bike.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Meghan, who is somebody from your network that could help us grow our network and possibly have on the podcast as a pretty cool guest?
Oh my goodness. You warned me you were going to ask me this question, and I've been thinking. And I mean, I definitely have some amazing women who I think that you could talk to. I don't have any names that are coming straight off the top of my head.
Yeah, no worries. You can get back to us.
But I think like one of the things, that I think is really helpful from a perspective of like getting more people into this sport or like growing or expanding your network of people, your podcast, is to talk to more like normal, like regular people, like me and you, obviously, right? That aren't professional athletes, that don't do this as their full-time job, right? People that are sort of like sitting on the, may have previously been sitting on the sidelines thinking, well, that's not for me because I'm not fast, or I'm too old, or I'm too, I'm too creaky. I got a message the other day from this woman who was like, I can't do this because I'm too old. She's 34 and she's too creaky, like she's, and I was like, okay, well, sounds like this is the perfect thing for you because it's going to force you to like deal with all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have to work on your fitness. You're going to have to work on your joints. You're going to have to work on your mindset. I told her, I was like, I was basically 34 when I started running ultras. So you're barking up the wrong tree. You're not going to get like any,
you're not getting sympathy. I love the people that are like
me.
my age, like, oh, I can't run because my knees are hurting. I'm like, well, maybe you should run.
Yeah. I have a lot of women that I work with who are in their 40s and 50s and 60s who are doing these races, which, to me, it's like, it's part of their identity as wanting to be as healthy as possible, as independent as possible for as long as possible, right? Like they don't want to just sit around all day long. And so I think like if people are hearing this and thinking those things, whether you're male or female, like just get out there and try, because, and a lot of times I feel like people say this stuff and they haven't been to a trail race. They're still maybe stuck in like the road mentality, like if they could get to a trail race, if they could get to an ultra, they would probably see a completely different point of view on who's there, what they look like, how fast or how slow they're going, just the whole vibe of everything. And so I feel like that would be a good place for people to go and hang out.
100%. 100%. Well, Meghan, we'll give you some time. Shout out whoever you want to shout out. Tell people where they can find you on socials, what's your website.
Yeah.
Time is yours.
Yeah, the best place I think to follow me is over on Instagram, just at She Runs Ultras, podcast under the same moniker. And I just want to shout out all of my amazing clients. You guys are, like I said, amazing. You're dedicated, putting in the work, showing up every day, crushing their big, scary goals. So keep at it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
If you like this podcast, please give us a like, hit a review on Spotify, hit a review on Apple. I think Google spot things went away, so you can't, all those reviews went away, but go back and hit us up on Spotify, Apple, leave us a comment on Meghan's IG post. And so go listen to Meghan. She Runs Ultras podcast and hit her up on social media. Thanks.